Many of our early ancestors sailed to the North American British colonies from the British Isles, other European countries, and Africa. They sought religious freedom, business opportunities, or adventure. Others were exiled, forced to leave their home countries. Most Africans were enslaved and brought to this land against their will. The colonies were under English rule. King George III wanted to control his subjects in England and the colonies through taxation of goods and property to rebuild his wealth. The British Empire was in debt due to the cost of the French and Indian War, 1756 to 1763. People living within the 13 colonies strongly disagreed with these unfair laws because they had no representation within the British Parliament. Some colonists sought independence from the Crown, while others remained loyal to the King. As a result, the Revolutionary War was fought on North American soil from 1775 to 1783. Battles took place from Canada to Georgia and from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indiana Territory. There were about 2.5 million people living in the 13 colonies in 1776. Even though many living within the colonies had family roots in England, they wanted freedom from English taxation and rule. They were known as patriots, people who loved their country and were ready to support and defend it. About 800,000 colonial citizens were patriots. Colonial soldiers had help from European countries. 12,000 soldiers and sailors from France. 7,500 soldiers and sailors from Spain. And soldiers and sailors from the Netherlands, who supplied gunpowder, muskets, and other goods. In 1774, actions were put into place that would lead to the creation of an independent country by forming a republic with new laws, rights, and freedoms. King George III sent a military force across the Atlantic Ocean to protect his claim. 22,000 soldiers and sailors were sent to fight in support of King George III of England. They had help from 30,000 German soldiers called Hessians. 300,000 to 500,000 loyalists were colonists who remained loyal to the king and fought alongside the British. These soldiers followed orders, making sure that colonists paid taxes that were due to the king. Both patriots and the British received help from Native Americans. In 1775, over 250,000 Native Americans lived east of the Mississippi River. As the Revolutionary War began, the more than 80 nations tried to remain neutral. As the war progressed, a few tribes assisted the patriots, who were neighbors and friends. Most tribes fought alongside the British, who were viewed as more powerful than the colonists. These Native Americans also thought that British tradesmen could continue to access supplies which the tribes had become accustomed to using. Native American nations who became involved did so in hopes that they would not lose their own cultures, independence, and lands. Free and enslaved African Americans fought on both sides. The British governor in Virginia offered freedom to any enslaved man who chose to fight with the British. More than 20,000 African American soldiers and sailors fought for the British. Between 5,000 and 8,000 men fought as patriots. These African American soldiers fought for their freedom as well. They hoped for new opportunities in the colonies and regular pay. Others were forced into service, taking the place of their masters. Throughout all 13 colonies, family members faced each other in battle. One would choose to fight for the patriots, while his brother or another family member supported the British. Battles were fought in cities, towns, on farmland, and at sea. They took place in fair weather, the heat of summer, the bitter cold of winter, and the rainstorms of autumn and spring. Whether planned or by coincidence, whenever the Patriot and British troops found themselves facing each other, there was a fight. Most patriots were farmers or businessmen, so the army needed to be trained. Soldiers were taught battlefield strategies. Walking miles from battle to battle was common. In February 1779, some soldiers walked 180 miles to Fort Vincennes in the Indiana Territory. Going into any skirmish was quite frightening. Townsfolk, and sometimes the soldiers on both sides, ran from battle to seek protection. When the men went off to fight, women took on many roles. Most women remained at home, taking care of day-to-day household tasks. They were also called upon to oversee their husbands' businesses or farms. Women made homespun cloth to support the Patriot cause. They boycotted or refused to buy material and clothing from England. They made clothes for their family members, as well as uniforms and blankets for the Continental Army. Patriot families may have found themselves boarding British officers and soldiers in their homes. There were also times when families had to defend their homes or flee to find safety from attack. A few women on both sides of the conflict served as spies. Women also voiced their views and opinions as they wrote articles in local pamphlets and newspapers. Some mothers, wives, and children of officers and soldiers followed along as men walked from battle to battle. They were nicknamed camp followers. Sometimes women found themselves fighting alongside the men. A few women dressed as men so they could join the fight for liberty. Most of these camp followers cooked, cleaned, washed and repaired clothes, tended to the sick or wounded, and cared for farm animals. As the war ended, General Charles Cornwallis of England surrendered to General George Washington of the Continental Army in Yorktown, Virginia, on October 19, 1781. Patriot soldiers returned home to their families. The government promised these soldiers a pension or pay and land for their efforts when the war ended. Professional French and Spanish soldiers moved into other countries experiencing revolutions. Many British and Hessian soldiers sailed back across the Atlantic Ocean to return home. 5,000 British and 5,000 to 6,000 Hessian soldiers remained in the colonies to begin a new life. 3,000 to 4,000 freed African Americans who supported the British set sail for England, Canada, the Caribbean, and other locations, along with about 80,000 to 100,000 Loyalists. A few African Americans who remained in the colonies were granted their freedom. However, most African American soldiers were forcibly enslaved once again. The newly established United States government continued the British policy of making treaties with the Native American nations. These treaties proposed that Native Americans remain within land boundaries and would be compensated for the taking of their ancestral lands. For a variety of reasons, some colonial families made the decision to leave their homes and move west. We will explore the early beginnings of the Indiana Territory and daily life of families post-Revolutionary War as they made the long journey to Indiana.